let's talk about winners and losers of NFL free agency. Cat's not going away. NFL free agency is... A lot of the big names have now come and gone through free agency. So I think a pretty good time to figure out who are the winners and who are the losers. You saw the subscribe button come up there before. If you're watching this on YouTube or any other video platform, would love a subscription on there if you could, if you like this. We got a lot of great sports content here on Couch Potato Diary. And if you're listening in podcast form, subscribe wherever you are listening as well. So let's dive in. Let's start with the winners. We start positively on this show. God, this cat's got a grip, man. I'm going to be a homer for a second. I think the Vegas Raiders have been kind of a winner of the offseason so far. I have this listed as free agency, and they've made a couple moves. Like Chin in the secondary, I think, is actually a really, really good move. That they've helped bolster the pass rush a little bit as well. But it is a lot of the trades that they have made, or the trades, I guess, they have made, that I think makes them one of the winners of this process so far. When you look at going from a season ago, Antonio Pierce and Aiden O'Connell as your quarterback coach duo, going from that to Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, you feel pretty good about where things are going. And so now, like, are the Raiders a Super Bowl contender? Probably not. Are they significantly better than they were a season ago? Yes, absolutely. They are. And the AFC is wildly competitive, so I don't know if it even gets them into a playoff spot right now. But when you look at where they're going to be drafting, you look at what else is available, I just, also, it looks like she's trying to leave, so we'll get a little face shot. Bye, Bailey. Yeah, you got a bed over there. You can just, there we go. Anyway, sports. I do think that when you look at where the Raiders were going to be drafting and what was going to be available, and really it's not, we've talked about it a little bit here on the podcast before, this is not really the best draft to really need a quarterback in. And so that they go out, they get Geno Smith, he's under contract for a couple more years. If Shedeur Sanders falls to them at 6, I even what you're paying Geno, you can still have Shedeur kind of redshirt there a little bit. Or if you want to go with like a Jalen Milroe in the second round or something along those lines, he can still redshirt behind Geno Smith. And so I just think the Raiders have put themselves in a really good spot at quarterback. You have a kid who already in 1 year has looked like one of the best tight ends in the National Football League to kind of build this offense around. I just think that they have addressed a few needs already here in this offseason. And they've put themselves in a spot where they are drafting in the first round, they're going to be able to address a few more needs. And so I think that's one of the things you've seen throughout this. And it's one of the things we talked about in the free agency preview is that this was a draft that kind of lined up pretty well, actually, with free agency in terms of the offensive line. For wide receivers, it doesn't really help out a whole lot. Quarterback, definitely not. But offensive line, if you needed an offensive lineman, it was probably better to wait until the draft to address that than go out and maybe spend a little bit on a free agent O-lineman. We'll talk about a couple teams that maybe needed to do a little bit more on that in a second. But the Raiders, I think, taking advantage of the strengths of the draft and where they're going to be picking to kind of help address some of the needs that they have. So I think the Raiders are definitely a winner of this offseason. An honorable mention to the Patriots as well. They've had the most cap space, and so they've gone out and just made a few smart additions, but I don't have them as a absolute locked-in stone cold winner. Second winner, the Chicago Bears. I think it was obvious to everyone that they needed to address the offensive line. And they were a team that, because of the youth they have at quarterback, but also the investment they make with a first overall pick in Caleb Williams, they needed to get an offensive line and couldn't just wait on, well, it's a good offensive line draft, so let's just go do that. And so they make a couple of trades, they make a couple of signings, and really just lock in the offensive line spot. And now I think it puts them in a position, because they got a couple of veteran guys, right? It puts them in a position where they can still draft there. And now you're trying to kind of follow the Eagles model as much as you can. We talked about it before. The Eagles model is just get a bunch of very talented players. But one thing that the Eagles have done really well is kind of backfill while those veterans are coming through. And so you can still go out and draft a offensive lineman and have them play behind a Tooney for a couple of years and just try to work them in a little bit and develop them. And so once those guys kind of age out, now you have a player with a high pedigree coming in and you don't miss a beat. And so that you can really see what the Bears are trying to do in that sense. And really that was kind of the only need they had. Like, you like the weapons that they have on offense. I think Caleb Williams is still a good quarterback, and defensively this team played really well a season ago. So the offensive line was kind of the missing piece, and I think they addressed that very, very well in this draft. So in free agency. So far so good. The Bears definitely a winner in free agency. A couple more winners to come, but also if you're watching this on YouTube either live or after the fact, make sure you hit that bell button and get notifications so you know when videos are dropping here from Couch Potato Diary. All that stuff just helps out as we're trying to grow the program. Next winner, the Minnesota Vikings. They are in a phenomenal spot, and they have not gone with the game plan that I had suggested in the our offseason previews, but they have done it in a way that has been very aggressive and has, I think, been very effective. I thought just stick with Sam Darnold. Like that, this team was very close to being the number one seed in the NFC a season ago, and then 8 days really just sends the season and the perception of the season into a spiral. But now I was a little hesitant because J.J. McCarthy, a little unproven, all those different things. So maybe you don't want to just be locking in that kid as the number one starter when you have this very talented football team. So let's just stick with what we know. We know we can make Sam Darnold work. You maybe have to pay a little bit more than you want to, but Sam's going to know that he's in an offense that fits him, and we are going to know that we have a quarterback that fits our offense for the most part. They didn't do that. They let Sam Darnold walk. They're putting all their eggs in the J.J. McCarthy basket, but they are spending that money very effectively. I thought this was a very well-rounded, very deep team before. Now they are one of the more well-rounded and deeper teams in the NFL with some of the additions that they have made. So I love what the Minnesota Vikings have done. And this was one... Sorry. This is why I usually lock them out. This was certainly a off-season game plan that I can get behind, and just a perfect use of some of the money to kind of get away from Sam Darnold. You're taking a risk with a rookie quarterback, but you have to feel pretty good about the direction of things. Swig of coffee for the working man. Cute puppy as well. Very animal themed so far here on Couch Potato Diary today. Last one of the winners. The New York Jets. Justin Fields, Look, this is now make or break for him, right? And now he's getting paid handsomely if he breaks, so he'll be fine. But he is, I think, at least good enough to let this roster kind of flourish a little bit. And a lot of the talk going into last season was, look, maybe Aaron Rodgers isn't capital letters Aaron Rodgers like he was before, but this is a really good roster, and he can just do enough to not screw it up and get this team across the finish line. That was obviously not the case, but it's still a good roster. And if Wilson just is fine sticking around now, you have him, you have Breece Hall, you have, I think, a decent, at least, offensive line and some talent on defense. You don't need Justin Fields to come out and win you a national championship like he did in college. You just need him to just, like I said yesterday, just keep it between the white lines, man. Like, let's just keep this thing on the road. I think it's a great value. I think it is, like, probably the second best quarterback available, and probably the best quarterback available to the New York Jets, because they're not trading up to get a Cam Ward, and they weren't going to make the trade for a Geno Smith or go out and get a Sam Darnold. Like, the quarterbacks that were available specifically didn't work for them. So it makes sense to go out and get this guy and really lock this in as a solid piece for a team that I think is going to be competitive in the AFC. And so, like, you look at it, we have two of our winners are from the AFC, which are two teams that weren't necessarily certainly weren't necessarily in the conversation for AFC contenders. And so I'm not saying, again, the Raiders and the Jets, like, watch out Chiefs or anything like that, but they have worked their way into that playoff discussion. And you look at the two winners from the NFC, it's the Bears and the Vikings. And so the toughest division in the NFC getting a little bit tougher with those two teams doing what they are doing. So, it's going to be difficult to make your way through the both. Like, just the talent in this league right now is at such a good, strong, high level right now. So you love to see that. We'll get to the losers here in just a second. A little bit later on today over on twitch.tv/primetimepk. We're going to be doing a video game stream, going to be continuing on with our Blue Jays stream. So we'll be talking some Vladdy, talking some baseball. Join me there. That is a 3 o'clock Mountain Time start over, again, twitch.tv/primetimepk. All right, into the losers we go. And we begin with the San Francisco 49ers. Last year kind of had season from hell vibes to it, and now they aren't doing a whole lot to get better. Deebo Samuel, that one just felt like it wasn't working. We need to free up some money. Let's move this out and move it on. We have Ricky Pearsall who can kind of take that spot, and we think Brandon Ayuk can be that guy. So, okay, good. Done and dusted. Awesome. Fantastic. But they keep losing pieces and losing pieces and losing pieces, and you're waiting for them to make the move to replace some of those. And it's not coming. And I just, in an NFC that is getting more and more competitive, I worry that they are falling behind here quite a bit. And now, obviously they have a big ticket coming up in Brock Purdy, and he's going to have to get paid. But that doesn't mean you just can't put out a good football team also. And I just think a lot of pieces that made this team are starting to go away. And there isn't an obvious replacement. If there was, last year wouldn't have been the year that it was. So they are putting a lot of eggs in Brock Purdy just figuring it out, and Kyle Shanahan just getting this thing back on track. And I have some concerns about the 49ers. It has just been loss after loss after loss after loss after loss, and it hasn't really worked. Another classic franchise gets into the loser category, as the Dallas Cowboys are losers of free agency so far. I think there's intrigue in a couple of the running back moves they made, Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams. I talked about the Williams one yesterday. I kind of meant to lump the Sanders one in and just forgot. But that's a very Cowboys move. It's kind of Raidersy too, as a fan of that team. It does kind of scream to that kind of strategy of, these are players at one point that produced well, and for whatever reason they aren't now. Let's see if we can get the most out of them. And so from that aspect, it's bargain hunting at running back. You can do that, but the problem is they did bargain hunting on everything. Like you look at the moves that the Cowboys made, and it kind of looks like when you're starting a Madden franchise right at the start of free agency, and you look at your rosters like, well, that ain't it. So you go through and, okay, well, these are the guys who are left. 1 year contract, 2 year contract. You're in an 80. You're fine. But they did that in the first 2 days of free agency. Now, again, they don't have a ton of wiggle room with some big contracts that they have signed and will need to sign. But I don't think they were little nibbles away from being a competitive football team again this season. They make a coaching change, which I was for. Again, I kind of said begrudgingly, like, I'm not a Mike McCarthy guy at all. But I said begrudgingly that this was a team that really played hard for their coach. So coaching maybe wasn't necessarily the big problem. Although, again, you move on from Mike McCarthy, you have a chance to upgrade. I don't think Schottenheimer was that. Okay, so maybe you have to make some upgrades in the offense, or make some upgrades on the roster, sorry. And I don't think they've done that either. So I think they have done a lot, but I don't think that it has led to a lot, if that makes sense. So I just don't think they're in a very good spot right now. When you look at the Eagles, when you look at great moves by Washington, they are another kind of honorable mention in the winners category with the Tunsil trade and stuff like that. They are getting better, and the Giants are at least going to be competent-ish next season. So you look inside that division, and it's tough to like what the Dallas Cowboys are doing. Didn't mean to set up this transition this way, but not tough to like this show. Make sure that you give us a like here on Couch Potato Diary, and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you are listening in podcast form, or if you're watching this later on Daily Motion. It's a like and a follow, I believe, over on there. Next loser. The next two coming from the AFC. The Houston Texans. I have them as a loser. We said before that they kind of needed to make a splash at wide receiver because Tank Dell's going to be out for most of the year, if not all of it. Stephon Diggs, that was probably just not going to happen. So they need to get a guy. I don't know if Christian Kirk is that guy. necessarily. Now, I do think it's an interesting compliment to Nico Collins, and it is kind of, we don't need Tank Dell. We have a Tank Dell at home. It does kind of like he can kind of just copy and paste into that role pretty well. But when you are looking at trying to keep up with the Chiefs and the rest of the Ravens and all of them in the AFC, it is Bills as well. It is going to be difficult, I think, for them to do that with that offense. And now you then go out and trade away Laramie Tunsil. And yes, like that, there were moves that needed to be made, but Tunsil, according to PFF, which say what you will, but he was one of the better offensive linemen in the league last year. So again, this is a draft that is deep on offensive linemen, and so maybe in totality, these moves might make a little bit more sense. But I think that this is a Texans team that hit a bit of a speed wobble last year and is really just banking on, yeah, it's gonna be fine. And I don't know that it will be. The good thing for them is that there isn't a whole lot of challenge from inside the division. The Colts, I like the Daniel Jones signing as a backup quarterback to Anthony Richardson. You like that all the way up until he has to play games. But I don't think the Colts have done enough to really be a challenge. So the Texans are still probably going to win this division coming up in 2025, and that's going to be fine for them. But if you want to take that next step with this rookie, or now third-year quarterback in C.J. Stroud, I don't think that this is the way to go about it necessarily. And the last loser here, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, they went out and addressed wide receiver and got probably the best wide receiver available in DK Metcalf. Excellent trade, fits perfectly, love that. But Russell Wilson leaves, which, neutral, I would say. But Justin Fields also leaves. And so now the musical chairs have kind of played out in a way where you are basically pigeonholed into Aaron Rodgers or an option that is worse. And I think the Aaron Rodgers option is a bad one. And so when that's best case scenario, I just think things have played out in a way that really leave you lacking for the upcoming season at quarterback. And again, when you look at how stacked the quarterback position is in the AFC, like we just saw with Aaron Rodgers, he ain't it. And now that the Steelers probably have a better roster than the Jets, not probably, the Steelers do have a better roster than the Jets do. But Aaron Rodgers ain't it, man. Like I get, we all got very happy about that last game of the year and what he was able to do in a game that was meaningless for both teams. But he is not a high level quarterback anymore. I don't know if he's a starting quarterback anymore. If he is, he's bottom half of the league, and that's not what this team needs at this point. So bravo to them for going out and addressing a big need at wide receiver, but you need someone to get him the football, and I just don't think that someone is available now. And so I just feel like they have played it pretty well at all the other spots, but the main one, the quarterback position, is not one that has gone well for them. So unless something falls to them in the draft that we're not necessarily anticipating, I think that this offseason is going to be an overall loser for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So those are the winners and losers in NFL free agency. More NFL free agency talk as the week rolls along. We now shift to combat sports.